is what everybody is here for. There will be a timestamp for this. Don't you worry. Shenmue 4. Here we go. Shenmue 4. Right. It's being revealed and released right now. No.
I wish.
I wish. Question is, Shenmue fans would love to see a new entry in the Shenmue series. Could you tell us anything regarding work or plans for Shenmue 4?
Right, so here's your answer, guys. So we're not working on it right now. It's still in the planning stage.
So then you ask, you sort of follow this up, what would it take to get a Shenmue 4?
Yu Suzuki says a partner.
And then we've got here, I'll stop at this point here because the other bit comes on to some story things. Have people expressed interest?
He says, well, yes, there has been interest shown by a lot of people, which is interesting as well, that they've got a lot of interest shown, but obviously something hasn't really stuck thus far. I mean, if you think back to those rumours about 110 Industries, maybe that could have been something that was one of these interested partners, but then it didn't go anywhere. You know, maybe you've had some sort of interest from it in games, perhaps that, you know, perhaps their budget isn't as high as what Yu Suzuki wants for Shenmue games, or that's like some interest shown. I'm just these are just ideas that I was just thinking about, like all the different companies that we know have sort of been attached to the Shenmue name in recent years, but never gone anywhere from it. You know, you've got your limited run games with Josh, who said that he would, if Shenmue 4 gets made, he would fund a Shenmue 5. You never know, maybe that's another interest there, that maybe Josh has been interested in, like, he's seen that there's not been much movement, so he's interested in Shenmue 4, and, you know, maybe something like this has happened. I don't know, guys. I'm just sort of thinking of the people that we know, that we've heard from, that may be potentially one of these partners that have been interested, but obviously something stuck, something hasn't actually amounted from that. So it'd be interesting to see you guys' thoughts on this section of this line of question. Where do we think Shenmue 4 is? I mean, in the planning stages, or is it further along than that? I mean, they must have something to have been pitched back in the day.
Agreed.
I think it's got to be, unless that still is the planning stages, but for me, it feels like it's further along than the planning stage, in a sense. Like they must have created something. But again, that could just be part of the planning stage. I don't really know how video game creation works like that.
With a pitch, I think you do something like a vertical slice of what you want to do with an overall game. So, and we know that exists. That was confirmed years ago by Cedric, and whether they've developed that pitch video or whatever it was, I don't know. It was confirmed some bits were playable in that as well. So whether they've developed some of that as part of the planning stage, I really don't know. The fact that it's still in planning is interesting because it means they're still actively thinking about it. And I'm going to make the point here that I know the headline is Shenmue 4 not in development, and there will be sections that just pin on that. And I get why, because we want Shenmue 4 to be in development. Everybody who watches, listens to all the dojo content, all the Shenmue community content, wants Shenmue 4 to be in development. This is confirming that it's not. But I don't think we should be surprised by that, personally, because there's not really been any sort of indications of anything anywhere. It's not really a shock. I think the smart money would have been on that anyway. It's nothing new. And I wouldn't twist it into anything else than it's not in development. It's not they don't want to do it or anything like that. It's very, very clear that they need a partner to work with. And the interest bit is the bit that I really want to pick up on here as a point. If there's been interest in it, that's fantastic. That's great, because it means that somewhere somebody sees something in Shenmue from a business standpoint that they can make this game work, they can make it happen. My question is that business standpoint enough in terms of the creative outlet that Yu Suzuki wants to tell the story of Shenmue 4 or 5? Do compromises need to be made to get that in the middle somewhere, that then we can physically get this thing done? James, you and I have talked about episodic for as long as we can, and I still stand by that it's a really good way of doing it. I know it was very controversial, that video I did. A lot of people got quite emotional about that. But there has to be a way. If there's interest in the thing, that means people see a viability in it from a marketing standpoint, from a business standpoint, to some degree. Is that point enough for Yu Suzuki to do what he wants? But on the flip side, does he need to make some potential compromises to allow it to happen? And the other question I have is actually, he's the creator, he can choose what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, for such a fan-driven IP, can be quite difficult for fans, including myself, to almost take, because we had a very big part in reviving the franchise, along with Yu Suzuki, along with everybody else who was involved with it, and I don't want to downplay any of it, but at the end of the day, it's his creation, so he has the right as a creator to choose how he wants to do this thing. I just wonder whether he is, I don't want to sound really critical here because I don't want to, whether he's refusing to digress from his own vision because that's what he really wants to do, because he thinks that's the best thing for the series, and it's not marrying up to what's there in terms of a marketing, business, proviso standpoint, if you know where I'm going with it. And I don't want to sound critical, but it's a fair question.
Yeah, I completely agree, Matt. I mean, there's some sort of element of beauty in the fact that he's very much, he wants to make sure whatever happens, it's the right, the right thing by the series. So maybe he has had some offers that aren't quite up to where he sees a Shenmue 4. He wants to make sure that he produces the best game that he can, and it is difficult. I mean, I'll point out that, and a little bit later in the interview, we do, if you've not read this interview yet, guys, there is some interesting things regarding the WiseNet and the company at the moment. They are busy. They've mentioned this previously in the early stages of the interview. They're busy working on things, and when you actually see what Yu Suzuki, he's got all these ideas that we'll get into at some point of projects that he's thinking about making. So you don't know how these deals are being made. He had an Apple deal for Air Twister, for example. We don't know if that factors in multiple games that they're currently working on, because they're fulfilling a business deal that's taken place since Shenmue 3, with the mindset that these games are going to recoup enough budget and facilitate perhaps them then turning their attention to a Shenmue 4 because of the success from these Apple Arcade games, or if they've got another partnership with another game that they're working on. I mean, for them to say that they're very busy, that they haven't even got time, in a sense, to acknowledge the 25th anniversary of Shenmue and do something because they're so busy and they're working on a lot, that is quite promising to me, to sort of hear that, because at least they've got work. At least the company's still there. I mean, we've been there in person. The company's there. These staff in there working at computer monitors while we were in there. So something must be ticking over for them to be able to continue producing games, and for them to even say that they're busy is promising to me. So it's difficult because we are Shenmue fans. We want more Shenmue things in the world. But then if you take the Shenmue aspect out of there, at the end of the day, it's a video game creating company. It's Yu Suzuki, who's also famous for Outrun, Hang On, Space Harrier, Virtua Fighter. He's got all these ideas, and he's kind of hampered with, and this is not a negative, that he's sort of stuck with all these people shouting for Shenmue all the time, and maybe he wants to do all the things. You don't know, maybe they were burnt out a little bit by the creation of Shenmue 3 and they want a break. I know from personal experience, Shenmue World Issue 2 sort of burnt me out a little bit because there was a lot to that, and then the packaging and all that sort of stuff. It took the fun out of it at the time, even though I'm back into the swing of things with Issue 3. But you can see that for 4 years working on one project and still wanting more time, and then it was cut short, and maybe there's a bit of like a disappointment feeling to that, and then the reviews that Shenmue 3 got, I know even Shenmue fans were disappointed with it. So some sort of, there could be damaging implications to that, as people have feelings, right? So if they see that their game series that they created, a Shenmue 3, hasn't done as well as they expected it to, or they wanted it to, even though it's a fantastic game. Just that the negativity outweighs the positivity. You know what I mean? When you release a YouTube video, Matt, and someone will leave a negative comment, that stands out more than all the positive stuff. So there could be a lot of factors into why Shenmue 4 is still in the planning stage. The positive is that the company's still very busy, and when you get to the end of the interview, that we're going to get to at some point, guys, so if you hang on, it seems very much that Shenmue 4 is something that they really, really want to do. And whether that just takes a partnership that could happen overnight. We could be sat here, since this interview, someone could have expressed interest that actually it does work for whatever they want to produce. You don't know how these deals happen. These deals just happen. Maybe the fact that this interview's out there in the ether and someone's listening to us right now or has read this interview and realizes that to get a Shenmue 4, I didn't realize that Yu Suzuki wasn't working on it. I'm a partner. I'd love to, like a big company like Sony. I'm pretty sure Sony must know the ins and outs. But you know what I'm saying?
I know where you're going.
This could trigger a partnership in itself, because it's been stated here that what would it take to get Shenmue 4? A partner. You know what I mean? So it would be nice, and I don't think that people should be disappointed by this. I don't really see this interview having, say, a clickbait headline that says like Shenmue 4 isn't in development, because like you say, Matt, it's kind of a given that it's not. We've not really had any inkling of it since Shenmue 3. There's been drips and drabs of like rumors and stuff, but they never really got anywhere. And we've seen that Yu Suzuki's been working on other projects. He announced with Ezra that they're working on a new game. So I just think that people perhaps, I know it's been 5 years, that's the issue we've got as well. Like this is a story-based game, and everyone that plays it wants to know what happens next, and we're all getting older and older and older, and we're not closer to finding out what happens next. So I do get, and I'm disappointed in a sense as well, that they're not working on a Shenmue 4, but then are our expectations maybe too high as well? Like I say, I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
It's tricky, because I think the bullet point headline, and someone will run with it and go, Shenmue 4 is not in development, it's over, blah, blah, blah. You know that. You know what gaming media is like these days. It's all very negative. It's all very much clickbaity stuff.
Yeah.
And actually, when you read the interview, you go through the rest of it, it's not that. It's a given. We know that. But actually, what they're thinking about, what they want to do, they're clearly thinking about it. They're clearly trying to find a way for this thing to happen, which makes it so important that people need to be vocal about this thing. And I've been saying this for years now. You need to get over Shenmue 3, because it ain't going to change people. So get behind Shenmue 4.
Yeah.
And we need to be on social media harassing Sega people and making it known that we want that fourth game, so you can show a prospective partner that A, the fan base is united, and B, there's enough money in this thing that we can get that continuation and we can nudge it over the line, because somebody out there, if there's interest in it, clearly wants to make it happen. It needs to make business sense. There needs to be a way that it makes sense for everybody, that everybody's happy, that they make money, we get the creative vision that we want, and that things progress forward.
And
I am obviously disappointed, but
yeah,
it's not a shock. It's just not a shock.
It's not a shock. And the fact that they're willing to sit down for an hour and 20 minutes to 2 hours with Shenmue fans discussing Shenmue and still be hesitant to reveal plotline spoilers, it just shows that they still intend to continue the series at some point. It's
And he said this 1,000 times. If there is no other way, then the novel will come out. But all the time that doesn't happen, there is a way. Now, I appreciate Yu Suzuki's getting older. He's in his 60s now. But why isn't it still open? It's making money. They're making games. They've got things on, which, as you say, is great. So all the time, why isn't it there? Great. That opportunity can happen. It's then, as I just nudging it over the line in the right way that satisfies everybody. And I think what the community needs to do with this is take this as almost a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to Shenmue 4 people,
We do need to shout still.
Get off your asses and start shouting. Because if we don't start shouting, it really won't happen. They want to do it.
We need to show these potential partners that there's enough of a fan base for them to think, like, yeah, okay, let's give it a go, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And that's the tricky bit. And when you tag on the economy, tag on what's happening in gaming and all the layoffs at the moment, it's tricky because some companies won't want to throw money at something like a Shenmue game. But I could flip that and go, well, actually, the whole AAA thing isn't sustainable. So there's a big market of people that, as potentially game production scales back to be more affordable, quicker, that these AA sort of titles find a niche, find a home, and Shenmue can very much do that. It really can. But the clickbait will go, Shenmue 4 is not in development.
Which is a shame, because there's so much in this interview, and like you say, people are just going to hone in on the fact that they haven't got any Shenmue 4 news, which, you know, I'm sorry, I couldn't get you any Shenmue 4 news.
And I don't think he's going to reveal Shenmue 4 in an interview with Shenmue Dojo, quite frankly.
Probably
as much
not.
As I'd like that. As much as I'd like him to do that, I don't think that's going to happen. But what we need to be aware of here is actually they have had interest. Big positive. Massive positive. If they turned around to us right now and said, not really been much interest, yeah, we're not quite sure what to do it, we would be royally screwed. But there's been interest in it. So that's a positive. So we need to take advantage of that and nudge that interest from an interest to an actual commitment. We can do that and make enough noise through the social media, through the content, through everything else that the community does. I believe it can happen. And I know we've talked about some wild things that we've got planned once we can get through a few bits and pieces. I'm going to move away because we've sort of gone on a soapbox a little bit about this. We're now going to go into some of the story around Shenmue 4 and what we might get coming forward.
Yep.
So in terms of the story, you say, do you see Ryo's journey ending in China or another country?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, if you look on the map, the chapter tiles map, the end of the game is like just in a Mongolia somewhere, isn't it? Like towards there, he's supposed to be in a Mongolia. We've seen screenshots of like Shenmue, well, not a screenshot, but Shenmue in like a Tibetan outfit and that sort of stuff. So I thought this question was an interesting one because of the follow-up question as well, what we'll get into is like what part of the train of thought here. But Yu Suzuki laughs and says Singapore. Again, showing his sort of relaxed nature there, cracking a joke. But then he confirms that, yeah, Ryo's journey is going to end in China.
And then you follow up and say there's no chance we'll see him go back to Japan, and he says not currently. So
yeah. That's what I meant. Like
that one a little bit, doesn't it? Because that's been around the community for years that he might go back to Japan. I know people want him to go back to Debui, to go back to the dojo.
Yeah,
not going to happen by the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I was getting at with that series of questions. I just thought I'd ask it in this way, just in case we got a peculiar answer before asking the Japan side of things, which is kind of like what the main point of the question was, I thought.
And then we come on to some really interesting stuff here around the Chi Men, the 4 leaders. So you asked a question that we've heard in previous interviews, that the Chi Men organization has 4 leaders with a single boss known as Tentai above them. Have there been any changes to this structure?
And then this is where we got some really, really interesting, news, really, because this has never been mentioned before. But Yu Suzuki actually says that there's one more person, he says. So not only have we got the 4 leaders and then the Tentai guy, big boss above them, there's another person.
Which is, again, news to me.
Yeah. So we were a bit shocked by that. We said, what, really? Another boss? And then he started drawing on these, these pieces of paper that I was saying that he was constantly sort of making notes and sort of showing us for extra little context what he was on about here. Hard to see in the photograph. Again, like, I didn't want to just say, can we take a photo of this? So here you can kind of see it from one of the other photographs that we sort of took around the sort of time of Yu Suzuki, but I've zoomed in there. I've sort of changed the contrast of the colours there a bit so you can sort of see the outline that he actually drew on the piece of paper here. So what he actually does was he sketches a tree diagram onto a piece of paper showing a single circle at the top level with the 4 circles below. So the top level there is Tentai and the 4 circles below all the 4 bosses that we already know about. So he says, indicating the top circle, this is Tentai, the big boss. Indicating the 4 circles, these are Landi, Niao-sun, and so on. And then he draws an extra horizontal branch between the 2 levels with an additional circle. And then he says, there's one more person here, the Chief of Staff, which I forget what it was called in Japanese, but it was something like show you or something. I'll try and look that up at the same time. Yeah. So he kept saying that. He kept saying that word in Japanese a few times, which is interesting. Yeah, Chief of Staff, and that is just, if you're looking at the image there, that's sort of where the pencil's sitting. That 6th boss that he was talking about there,
which is very, very interesting. So you then ask, are they male or female? He says male, and highly knowledgeable, like an expert strategist and advisor. Now that's interesting that there's a strategist involved, because that's the first we've ever heard of something like this.
Yeah, so when I heard that word, this is me with the follow-up question here, I was thinking, you know, I was on about Baisha being like a sort of a 3 kingdoms or you know, warring kingdoms sort of vibe. I was thinking maybe that's what he's thinking of with the term strategist, because I know that's kind of like all these guys on horses, and there's like a big strategy to the sort of the raid, whatever's going on there. So I said perhaps like a strategist from China's 3 kingdoms period. So Yu Suzuki, he sort of just makes like an agreeing we don't know whether or not he was agreeing, or perhaps he was thinking. Maybe he's not agreeing. It's kind of left to the listener to decide there, or the reader in this case.
He's sort of mulling it over almost.
Yeah.
And then the next question, as a follow-up to that, you ask, will they make an appearance in Shenmue 4?
He says he probably won't appear until Shenmue 5, but maybe at the end of Shenmue 4. So does that mean that, do you reckon the other bosses are going to make an appearance in Shenmue 4 then? If there's a chance that the 6th... Yeah, well, if the 6th boss has a chance of appearing at the end of Shenmue 4, but he probably won't appear until 5, we're going to have to get some more bosses in Shenmue 4.
We're going to have to, aren't we? It's absolute insanity. We don't otherwise, which, again, we sort of cover some of this a bit later in the later question, but the fact that there is like a level between the 4, then you've got Tente, and then you've got this Chief of Staff sort of sitting between them, begs the question, did Niao-sun act on orders from them? Yeah,
well, I was thinking, and I was also thinking this at the time, and I kind of wish I just outright asked at the time, but I was thinking, because I was kind of thinking differently. I was going on that sort of Warring Kingdoms train of thought, but then afterwards I was thinking, the way it sounds like this strategist, this guy that's not a leader, maybe it is just simming, I was thinking. But I was hesitant to ask because of also that earlier question where he was like, that wouldn't make the main story, it might be a side story with zimming and chewing. Yeah, but when you think about it, if you look at that side story comic, Niao-sun, zimming sort of... And it's been spoken about in the Shenmue Master interviews that he isn't one of the 4 leaders. So, but Simming does feel like a big boss, so maybe he is the 6th boss that's sort of just creating these strategies and plans, potentially for a Niao-sun.
Maybe.
I'm not sure. Maybe. That's something that came into my head, and I kind of wish I just outright asked, you know, is that guy zimming? Just to sort of see if we could sort of tell at least a reaction from Yu Suzuki. But unfortunately I didn't.
Never mind. Again, though, it's still quite an interesting point.
Very.
There's another layer to this thing that we didn't really know. And then the sort of final question on this, you then ask that we know of the 2 mirrors in the game, but do any more mirrors exist? Is there a relationship between the number of mirrors and the number of Chi-Yu men leaders? Yeah,
just another sort of question from my own sort of brain here that I just wanted a bit of confirmation on, really. If there's going to be 2 more mirrors, 1 for each boss. Obviously, we've got the concept art of like what looks to be a tiger mirror shape design that was, you know, from back in the day. But Yu Suzuki says that no, there's no connection. So to me, that sort of confirms that there's only going to be 2 mirrors. There's only ever going to be 2 mirrors.
Yeah, and I think that's rock solid confirmation of that at this point in time. So then we come on to future Shenmue games. Now, again, this this opening question, I think, is probably a discussion point in itself.
Yeah.
But it's one that I think we're all keen to have asked, and this answer has been asked many, many times. I think the answers have changed a little bit over the years, give or take. But you outright ask, what would your preference be for the number of games to complete the series? And there's a nice picture here, actually.
There's a nice picture. It might not be that it might not be me asking this particular question, because you've got the sort of a Yu Suzuki death stare there at me, but this is his answer anyway. He says, I think it would probably be best for the players also to reach the ending in 2 more games. So again, he's still sort of sticking to that 2-game mindset. And he says, and for those people that want to know everything about the story after completing the series, perhaps a novel or similar could be released. Which is a great thing to hear. I love that.
Yeah, that's interesting that he's then gone, I don't want to release the novel until the games have been done. And that, again, reconfirms that. But also, when things have been finished, that he's willing to release the novel. Because actually, that's going to give us what was in it, what wasn't in it, what we'd like to see if they remade things. There'd be a million and one thing. We go mad over something like that in comparison to the games. It'd be great content for years, wouldn't it?
And it also kind of means that they kind of don't have to fulfill every single little element that we've built up in our brains in the future Shenmue titles, because hopefully that would be in the novel version to give us a bit of peace of mind, but the games could focus elsewhere, kind of a thing. It sort of gives them a little bit more leeway then to perhaps not try and completely cram everything in 2 more games, if some of the answers could be left for the novel for the sort of the lore drooling fans.
Which would be good. And actually, it might also factor in, if the anime does get a second season, they can use some of that novel aspect in that side of things, which gives that side of it its own identity away from the games, which the first season of the anime did really, really well. And I think, I mean, more Shenmue content, the better, really. Yeah. But that would be... We'll see how it goes. But I like the fact that they are willing to release a novel once this is done. And sort of following on from that, you ask, how do you foresee a possible development time frame for the next games in the series? And this answer is very interesting.
This is a good answer. So he says, if there are 2 more games, then at say 5 years each, it would take 10 years. Even if Shenmue 4 and 5 were done together over 6 years. So yeah, that's an interesting point as well. So he's sort of got that in his head. That's good. Again, that's goes back to the Shenmue 4 sort of disappointment that we're hearing. But then now he's sort of saying that he's kind of got an idea in his head that if it took him 5 years for each of those games, it would take 10 years. So in theory, based off of this answer, we could have a Shenmue 4 and a 5 by the year 2034. But then he's also saying, but there's I guess maybe he's thinking if the right partner comes on board and we can do a 4 and a 5 at the same time, sort of like what they did with the Shenmue 1 and 2, then it would only take 6 years. So that's pretty a cool answer to hear. I think that he kind of understands in his head actually now how long it might take for this series to get done. Because if you think previously he was saying, I think it was one of the GDC talks or something where he was saying even if they did each chapter every year, it would take 10 years. And then it's been 10 years since he said that, and we're kind of like only a chapter on or 2 chapters on from that. So if he'd have done a chapter a year, we'd have been finished by now, essentially, whereas we're still quite a long way from it. So he's kind of now saying 5 years a chapter in a sense, isn't he, or 5 years a game. So he seems to be a little bit more, what's the word, like he sort of understands the time frame it would take now to get this done.
Yeah, and I wonder if this answer leans in a little bit to what you alluded to around the partner, that he is potentially seeking a partner for 2 games rather than 1.
That's a good
which
point.
Is a big commitment in itself, which could be a stumbling block for a partner, because they may go, well, we want to see how Shenmue 4 does before we commit to a Shenmue 5. And there were rumours flying around with Shenmue 3 that if that did well, would Deep Silver have come back for Shenmue 4 and all that sort of thing. So it does beg the question that I think he wants to do 2 more games.
Yeah.
And I'm reading between the lines. I have no evidence of this whatsoever. I wonder if that's a stumbling block for potential partners, potentially.
It could be, but then in the same breath, it's a good angle to sort of sell the project on, because he's kind of saying that it's going to take 2 more games to finish the series. So if he's then suggesting that the 5th game is going to be the last game, then is that a good angle for a partner to come on board? So they're not just facilitating this game that isn't going to, still not going to finish the series and going to get a lot of fans annoyed or whatever again, or a lot of randomers that have been following the story and they were annoyed that Shenmue 3 didn't finish it, and then you got Shenmue 4 and you're sort of pushing the boat. But if you can package them as a deal for a certain partner, that you can make these last 2 games and get the series finished, that to me seems like a good angle. Like if he's holding out a few extra years to get the right partner that can make 2 games in a sense, or give them a deal that confirms they can make 2 more games, then he won't be stuck in this sort of endless void that he's stuck in now at the end of Shenmue 3, where they had the funding for 1 game and now they're kind of stuck because they still need 2 more games. So he's sort of learnt from the mistake of, instead of asking a partner to just do 1 game, if I ask him to do 2 games, we can get this thing wrapped up.
Yeah, I see your point. Is it viable?
It's a tough ask for sure.
Yeah, that's the question I think we're all probably asking in the community. I know it's been discussed in our Discord for on and off for a few years now, is whether they can make it viable. If they can, I want both games. I really, really do, because I think that would be the proper vision. We get the story we want and everybody's happy as Larry, hopefully. I am yet to see evidence that it's viable, but I'm happy to be told I'm wrong. And I really do want to be told I'm wrong, because I'd love to see a 4 and a 5.
I would, man. And this next little section of, because he's still sort of on the same answer here, this is really interesting. So he actually gets a piece of paper out again, starts sketching. He sketches a line marked out with the chapter. So sort of like that blackboard, not blackboard, but whiteboard rather.
Oh yeah.
Image of like the 1 to 16. This is kind of what he did on a sheet of paper, which was quite interesting, but 1 to 11. And then he sort of starts shading in parts of the chapters that have been completed. So he says if the novel is this long, so he's sort of saying it's like 11 chapters. So far, this much of it has been put in the game. So he shades approximately a third of this 1 to 11 line. He's trying to say that a third of this line so far has been completed. That's what we got so far with 1, 2, and 3. Then, for example, these parts could then go into a 4 and a 5, shading further areas of this line, and then these into 6 and 7 even, which is crazy for him to even say that. Or alternatively, at the end of 5, so he's basically saying that he could potentially squeeze. So if he had it that his own way, a third of the game's been done. The next 2 games would be a third, and then the 2 games after that would be a third. But then he's saying, alternatively, both 2/3 in the next 2 games and end it at 5 kind of thing. And then he says, but then if locations like your Baishas, your Liyuan were to be included too, then, the end may never be reached. So, which is,
You're quite right.
It is quite right that, he's got all these IDs, all these chapters, all these locations and stuff. If he was to include absolutely everything, we might never get there. So he then says it could be shrunk by telling some of the story, for example, in dreams or as flashbacks. Include everything in 2 more games. Include everything in 4 games. I don't think trying to squeeze it all into just 1 more game is a good idea, though. So it seems like he's dead set on at least 2 more games.
And that's interesting that he said that, because I know he's previously commented saying he could probably finish it in a 4th game, but it sounds like that he doesn't want to for I'm guessing creative reasons, which that is his prerogative as the creator of the Shenmue series. I do like that he's thinking about shrinking or telling some of the story in an alternative way within the game, like dreams or flashbacks. I know he talked about playable flashbacks with Ezra in that interview last year.
Yeah.
So that fits into that side of things. It comes. I like the idea of 4 and 5. I like what he's thinking. It's whether whether it's viable to do it. is the big question here. But I want that full vision. I really, really do, and it excites me that he's got ideas of how he can get the story in, as much of the story in as he can, shrink things down to make it work, so that can potentially be done. Whether we see that is another question, but this is why we need to make as much noise as we should do.
Yeah, well, the problem. Sorry, man. I was just going to say the problem you've got is you don't know how much of the rest of the story is. In his head, he knows he's got all these ideas, all these story things that he wants us to see and witness and stuff. And you know, he's obviously, when he's only shading the third of the line, and that's where we're at with Shenmue 3. It might seem mental that he's still got 2/3 of this line left to tell, but in his head, he's got this story. You know, they've worked on it. They've got a novel. These things he wants to add in there. So someone sort of pressuring him to sort of cut half of that and just make one more game to conclude the story. As a creator, as someone that's has this story in his head, it must be so difficult to sort of come to terms with designing a way to just end something that you've put so much time and thought into just to get the story ended. So I do admire that he wants to at least tell enough and find ways, like you just said, like flashbacks and stuff, of trying to squeeze these elements of the story that he really wants us to see. Otherwise, he probably would just create another game. He probably would have just ended it with Shenmue 3, but because he wants to make sure that he gives Shenmue enough love. I mean, I admire that in a sense, even though it's probably unrealistic. I just really appreciate that he cares so much about his creation there, that, you know, he's not happy to just shove it all into one game.
Yeah, it's brave. It's definitely brave.
Yeah.
I'll give him that.